Baruch Hashem, you're a bad Jew.
Shalom.
Wow, you made it. Welcome back to Bad Jew. I really appreciate you tuning into this episode. And I want to thank you. Out of the millions of podcasts that exist out there in the world right now, you chose this podcast to take your Jewish learning from. This is Bad Jew, the place where there is no such thing as a bad Jew. With me today is Rayna Exelbierd. Rayna is the CEO, the Chief Empowerment Officer of The Rose Grows. Rayna, do you mind giving us a little pitch as to what The Rose Grows is?
Yes. Hi, everyone. The mission of The Rose Grows is when one grows, we all grow. This idea through having conversations and through acts of kindness and supporting each other, we can overcome our biggest challenges, but also accomplish some of our biggest dreams too.
I think that's really beautiful and inspiring and very motivational. You are a motivational speaker. You are a children's author as well. Be sure to check out The Rose Grows. But before you do that, Rayna, you have a Bad Jew challenge right of way into this podcast. Are you ready?
I am ready!
Echad, shtaim, shalosh, go.
Fabulous. My name is Rayna Rose Exelbierd the First. I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, the granddaughter of Holocaust survivors. And my whole life, I've always been the girl who said hello to everyone. People wrote in my yearbooks that I was the first person to say hi to them at camp or at other programs in my life. People would, write me notes at the end to let them know that I was the first person who sat next to them. And truly, through having conversations with people who are different than me, I've been able to create once in a lifetime bonds and incredible life experiences. In a nutshell, this Jew from Memphis, Tennessee went to Israel when she was 18. I had the best year of my life. I was doing archaeological digging. I was in the army. But you should know, growing up as a young woman in Memphis, Tennessee with 3 older brothers, I didn't feel so confident as a woman. I didn't have a lot of boyfriends growing up, and I went to a really academically challenging high school where I didn't make straight A's, but through being involved with community service, going away to Jewish sleepaway camp, being involved with BBYO, Young Judea, that gave me leadership experience. That gave me the opportunity to travel, meet amazing Jewish people from all over the world who I'm still friends with today. And most importantly, that's what gave me my confidence as a young person. So it was in Israel at 18 for the first time I realized that I was hot. I never thought I was ugly, but all of a sudden I'm in Israel and I'm like, I'm smart, I'm funny. And it was the first time in my life I felt accepted for who I was. It was almost like Israel and all the people I met, they became my best friend. Wow. Now I want you to imagine I had the best year of my life. I found myself as a woman. I moved to South Florida to go to college in Boca Raton. And they had told me in Israel, I actually plagiarized a paper about Israel in this Israel advocacy class, only to end up working for an Israel education organization years later. But I didn't take the class seriously because they said when we go to college, we might experience anti-Semitism. Now, as the Jew from Tennessee who never experienced it a day in her life, I was really shocked when I moved to college in Boca Raton. I experienced a lot of anti-Semitism. I was cyberbullied. I had a fake eviction notice put on my dorm. These students were allowed to bring in speakers who said the Holocaust never happened. So it was through overcoming those challenges that I realized I knew that my grandparents survived the Holocaust. I knew that I lived in Israel, but I didn't know the history. I didn't know the story of my grandparents. So it was through overcoming those challenges, I found my passion for inspiring and empowering other people. In 2015, I graduated with an international business degree. I went to the nonprofit world for 4 years, working for an Israel education organization, only to eventually start The Rose Grows, where I work with people of all ages, elementary school students through my children's books, teenagers when it comes to leadership, female empowerment, and most importantly, leveraging my experiences with anti-Semitism to create programs and conversations around diversity and inclusion on college campuses and corporations. So I'd like to end by saying that I am proud to be a Jewish woman using all the Jewish experiences that I had growing up to make a difference, to make an impact and inspire people of all backgrounds and all ages. And in my opinion, that is the biggest mitzvah that you can do. Go be a light.
Wow.
How'd I do? Was that under 4 minutes?
You just went a couple seconds over. I canceled it so that way the timer wouldn't interrupt you. But Rayna, that was like one of the most powerful 4-minute introductions that this podcast has had yet. That was amazing. Your energy, your ruach is beautiful. And I love that message, be a light. And for those who couldn't see just now, Rayna even did a little dance just now. So welcome to Bad Jew. This is amazing. You know, you're here on this podcast and you were talking about your experiences with anti-Semitism. This might tie into today's episode, by the way. I dealt with all kinds of anti-Semitism in college too, for sure. At San Francisco State. I mean, that's wow. You know, if you go and look up my last name, Volk for CSU Board of Trustees, you'll know that I was in a whole class action lawsuit against my college for anti-Semitism. So
holy shit.
So like, yeah, I'm not a stranger to this, right? But here was an incident actually that I don't talk about often that I will talk about on this episode because it ties into the theme.
You better talk about it. I'm like, I want to hear about that.
So I had a friend, let's call him Dave, right? And we both were in cinema together. We both were studying film. And every time Dave would see an Orthodox Jew, like a black hat, Orthodox Hasidic man walking down the street, he would open up Snapchat, take a picture, send it to me and say, "Hey, Chaz, look, it's you."
Oh.
And he kept on doing it over and over and over. And I eventually told him, "Hey, dude, it's not really that funny. Can you stop?" And eventually I cornered him in the cinema department. I remember doing this too. And I said, "Do you have a problem with me? Do I look like a black hat? Like, do you even know anything about my Judaism or me at all? Can you stop that?" You know? And he said, "No, I don't have a problem with you." I'm like, "Yeah, well, stop. It's not funny. I'm tired of it. And then later on, I realized we're in the cinema department. Ironically, you know, he's a consumer of media. So he has seen images of Tevye, you know, growing up. He has seen, you know, these kind of stereotypical Ashkenazi Jewish looking figures. And that's the only representation of Judaism he has probably ever consumed. And by the way, for those who are listening on Apple Podcasts, I do recommend going on YouTube because there's a lot of visual aid to this particular episode. So I realize it's not entirely his fault. He's just ignorant, right? The question is, Rayna, what do Jews look like?
People. They have a heart. They have a soul. They have a brain. And, you know, the first time I went to Israel when I was like 16 years old, I was so shocked to see police cars there with their lights on because, like, all I ever heard about Israel and Jewish people were like only really good things. But I'd like to start off the conversation that Jews are people. There are some really amazing Jewish people out there, but there's also some bad Jews out there. And when I say bad Jew, I don't mean in reference to the podcast. I mean, there have been Jewish terrorists. There have been Jewish men in business like Bernie Madoff who robbed not just Jewish people, but people all over the world. So I think the first distinction is Jews are people. And until you have a conversation with the person sitting next to you or across from you at the gym, you have absolutely no idea what someone's backstory is. Something special that I'd like to share with you. When you were talking about your friend Dave, hi, I'm Dave. I kept thinking about that TV show when you said that. But when you brought up the picture of Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof, I've been going to a new gym. Yeah, I've been going to a new gym the last 6 months. And there's this really, really, really nice trainer. He's African-American. And we're always high-fiving. You know, we have like small conversations here and there when I'm leaving the gym. And a couple months into me working out at the gym, all of a sudden one day he says to me, I think I showed him like a video of me with a Holocaust survivor from a trip, right? And after I showed him that video, he looked at me and he said, Rayna, do you know why my name is Tevi? And I go, no. He goes, I never told you. And I go, you never told me. And he goes, it's because my godfather is Jewish, and that's why my name is Tevye.
Wow.
So I also want to point out too that, the Jewish population, we might be small, but we're mighty. And it's really fascinating and cool to learn about how our history, our accomplishments, our challenges can even make an impression or change the life of someone who's not Jewish. And that's why I go back to that idea of how important it is to be a light and to be a contribution, because the more you give, the more you'll learn about yourself and the people around you. And in my world, it just makes everything a lot more rosier that way.
Good plug-in, by the way. But yeah, I wanted to say that I think that's absolutely true. I love that the way that you describe the diversity among our people, while also acknowledging the fact that we have been a pretty strong group of people. Just recently, by the way, the lead singer from Disturbed came out wearing an IDF shirt, and he called out Roger Waters for his anti-Semitic performance in Germany that he did, where Roger Waters dressed up in a Nazi uniform and had anti-Zionist content being projected behind him while doing this, right? And this lead singer from Disturbed came out and said, we are a mighty people. We've been through way tougher, way more difficult situations in the past. We are alive. We are well. And he sang Hatikva. This heavy metal singer sang Hatikva. Normal singing, by the way, not screamo or anything, just regular. And it was beautiful. He got the entire audience to sing with him. It was this beautiful Jewish empowerment moment. And those are moments that are just so beautiful. That lead singer doesn't look like any stereotypical Jew, right? And just to give everyone an idea of this, what a stereotypical Jew might look like, every single year in Halloween, I always cringe when I see this costume pop up.
Boy, yeah.
I think this is appropriation, personally, but because
we're Jewish, yes, it is.
because we're Jewish and we're only 15 million people in the world. It's really difficult to get a petition for Spirit Halloween costume stores to take this off their shelves.
Yeah,
I think it's really not okay.
That's not my husband. That's not my brother. That's not my uncle.
Yeah. And then on the other side of this, by the way, on the other side of the argument, I have a very mixed relationship with the portrayal of Jews. I feel like everyone does, by the way, a mixed relationship of the portrayal of Jews in cinema outside of Fiddler on the Roof, right? Fiddler on the Roof, we have kind of the stereotypical Ashkenazi Jew, and audiences take that in as what a Jew looks like. But then I remember watching Wolf of Wall Street, and we come across John Bernthal's character, right? He's wearing a giant high necklace while lifting weights shirtless. And at first I was kind of like, whoa, that's pretty badass. They don't ever show Jews like that, right? And then I also remember in the movie, John Bernthal's character is a criminal who loves money. So, kind of cringy, right? On the other side, here's Adam Sandler. Both these guys are Jewish actors, by the way. Here's Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems, right? He plays another conniving, Jew who's trying to bargain his way up into riches. And it's a troublesome, problematic movie, but it's excellent. It's an amazing movie, actually. So, the portrayal of Jews in modern day media is a very mixed bag, for sure.
So with that, I have three interesting points to bring up. One is, sometimes in Hollywood recently, people get really upset when an actor is cast to, say, play an Asian role or a Native American role, and they don't come from that particular background. I remember 2 years ago, I met an incredible professor when I was in Minneapolis for business. He runs the Jewish Studies department. Go figure, we end up at the same piano bar, restaurant. But he was telling me that he had this class that was all about Jews in media and cinema. and most of his students weren't Jewish. And what he told me that like really surprised me was at the end of the course, for those who don't know, on Amazon, there's a TV show called The Marvelous Miss Maisel. And I love that show. It actually inspired me to start doing stand-up comedy a couple years ago. But this professor told me something very interesting. He said, again, his students, I think like 99% of them are not Jewish. He said the students found it offensive that they cast Miss Maisel, but she's not a Jewish woman playing a Jew. So we kind of have to also have this question of, number one, does it matter the background, of the person? Right. And two, when it comes to like the actual portrayal in film, there's two things I want to bring up. One is, obviously the caricature of Jewish people, but the other is the accuracy, right? So these last 2 points come from when I was 18, I was living in Israel. I went to go visit a family member of mine who, some people in my family are very observant, some people not as observant at all. I identify as orthofox. I am modern Orthodox. I went to an Orthodox day school growing up. Those are the tunes and the traditions that I like to practice, when it comes to holiday time. And so
I was going to say, and with like the stereotypes I have in mind for what modern Orthodox is, or modern Orthofox, as you say, I would not have guessed that you would identify as that based on how you currently are dressed, because you're showing your sleeves and, it's just something I noticed. And that's, again, breaking stereotypes here. Anyway, continue. I just had to point that out.
No. Yeah. And I'm glad that you brought that up. So one of my relatives, they were running a seminary, and, for the sake of the story, the only thing I want to bring up is I remember we were having this conversation, and I don't remember who started the conversation, but basically she said that it was so offensive to her that, there would be Jewish jokes in American movies, and that there would be, these like Jewish innuendos. And I just kind of looked at her and I was like, but the writers are Jewish. You realize the people who are writing it, isn't this like really, I didn't say badass to her face, but I was like, isn't this like really amazing that we've come so far that we're writing the movies and we're putting in jokes that only people who are a part of our tribe, are going to recognize. So for me, I saw that as like a prideful thing. I don't knock anyone else's perspective when I say that to my relative. To her, Judaism is so holy that for you to put it in mainstream media, it's, for her, her views can't align with that. And the other thing I want to share that was really interesting was when I was 18, I took this class in Israel about Holocaust films. And the whole point of the class was, what makes a good Holocaust film? Number one, is it accurate? Is it actually a true story? Because unfortunately, believe it or not, a lot of the movies that are out there that have gotten a lot of attention, not all of them are historically accurate. But then we also have to take a step back as artists and say, is it about inspiring people with the work so that they're then inspired to do the work on their own of learning the accuracies, right? Or is our role to make films that maybe might not be so entertaining, but they hit on, whatever dates and whatever facts. And for that, every Jewish person is different. We all walk into the clothing store that's called Judaism. We all pick out, I walked into the Judaism store. There was this awesome vest there. It had an Israel flag on it, 2 different color shoes. And you know what? I looked in the mirror. I said, I look great. And the cool thing about Judaism, it's all about refinement. So what's your vibe now could totally change in a couple years if you're having children or moving to a new place or going through a life experience where now you're like, okay, I need the support of that community, or like, I really need to lean into this, into this teaching to find something out, about myself.
Well said. I think that brings about a really great transition into something I wanted to show that was really interesting. Something that we've talked about on this podcast is that if a modern day Jew went into a time machine and went into the past and looked at what a Jew looked like back in the day, like let's say the Renaissance time, you might come across your fellow Jew looking like this. Again, if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, I highly recommend you go to the YouTube channel, because I just pulled up a picture of this couple, and they're wearing clothing that just is not recognizable to today. This is Renaissance era, right? So we're talking about we're talking about 14th to 17th century here of what Jews used to look like. These are real old fashioned. I mean, look at her hairstyle too. That's a really neat hairstyle. That cool X things that she has on her forehead going on. I don't exactly know what I'm looking at, but that's really cool. So you notice that. And of course, that looks very different than how a Hasidic man, because, we have the Hasidic movement and things pop up today. This is what we see today. So they look pretty different, as a matter of fact. And I don't know. I find that very fascinating. I like the concept of entering into the Jewish store. But I also like that you said the word refinement, because this is exactly what we're talking about. Jews are always refining not just how we look, but also our views, and also how we interact with the world as it constantly changes and updates.
Totally. And even if you're not Jewish and you happen to be listening to this podcast, you too should be on a path to refinement. Throughout our life, we should always be setting goals, overcoming different challenges, putting ourselves out there, all these things.
I like that a lot. I think that that's actually a major message. We've talked about this in a little bit on the podcast as well, but there's the concept of tikkun hamadot, right? Which tikkun olam is repairing the world, but tikkun hamadot is to repair yourself, right?
That's the most important thing. And honestly, I think they're connected. Like, when I think about the times where I've been the lowest of low and I've been so depressed, helping other people doesn't make the darkness go away. It just adds light to that dark space. So definitely big advice for anyone listening. If you're going through a really, really, really hard time, number one, get out of bed. That's first step. And number two, if you can be a contribution to somebody else, whether it's giving them a ride, letting them play with your dog, cooking dinner, helping your elderly neighbor bring her groceries up the stairs. There's no thing that's too small that if you're doing it in service of someone else, ultimately it's going to bring that light back to you, for sure.
Well said. I think that's beautiful. Piece of advice that I've always given is that if I'm feeling down, that I should go out of my way to help others. And that will always make you feel better. But I want to bring it back actually to the very beginning of the podcast. There was something you said during your 4-minute introduction that I think might directly interact with this topic. And that was you moving to Israel for the first time.
Yeah.
When you first moved to Israel for the first time, I have a funny question, and it does tie into the episode, but I would ask, how did you look stepping off the plane? And how did you did that look later on change? Not talking about you being in the IDF in your uniform, but I mean
well, I will say at the beginning, I thought going to the IDF would turn me into this sexy fitness chick. It did not. You eat chocolate spread that's so sugary you can see the sugar in it. You're drinking chocolate milk out of a bag. I called it the Choco Blues, because if you want
Choco Besakit, the best.
Yeah, I used to call it the Choco Blues because if you're in the middle of the desert and there's chocolate milk in front of you, obviously you're gonna drink as much as you can, but if you drink more than one, it's really not that great of an idea. So number one, for anyone who's listening, if you think that the army is gonna make you more fit, just reevaluate that. Depends on where you go in the army. I'll say when I first came to Israel, one of the biggest things that really helped me develop my own style was living with Jews from England. Shout out to, all my my former year course roommates. Even though we weren't the bestest of friends, they really, really, really made an impact on me. And a big part of that was caring about what you put on when you walked out the door. So in Tennessee, as a teen, Nike shorts, like a sweatshirt, like hair was in a bun 90% of the time. I used to call it a bun dial. You could like tell what time it was by where my bun was on my head. But, you know, living with these British girls, it would always be like, Ray, are you really going to wear that jumper again? Growing up with 3 older brothers, it's not like I had like sisters with good style, you know, to borrow clothes from. So through, you know, looking back at it, I was actually kind of a jerk. I was thinking about this the other day. They let me borrow all their clothes, but I don't think I ever washed them. So maybe it's a good thing I didn't say any names. I just want those girls to know I have that self-awareness now, like at 31. I'm really sorry I didn't wash your clothes when I borrowed them, but I am so grateful that you allowed me to wear them and like almost like feel like a Barbie, you know, when I was in Israel. And then the other thing too was, you know, and Israel at the time, it's been a couple of years since I've been there, but it was all about, you know, women having winged eyeliner and having like a red lipstick. And, you know, the women in Israel, I mean, again, it might be different now with social media and trends, but like heavy makeup was never like a trendy thing there when I was younger. So, you know, learning how to put on makeup properly and not have to like be an expert at it, you know, in order to feel good about myself. That was, and I'd say the biggest thing is the people who I met made me feel so good about myself that truly when you feel good in your own skin, you could be wearing a garbage bag and people will think it's like summer runway, you know, Dior. So I really want to echo that. I know people are always like love yourself, be yourself, but there's just this glow that comes from within that, you know, even when I was younger, like some of the best nights, I was not wearing makeup. Like I was not prepared for an adventure. Like the opportunity just presented itself. So I think like when you're at peace with yourself, when you feel good about yourself, naturally, you're a lot more approachable. And for me, you know, when people want to hear what I have to say and when people tell me they like what I'm saying, that gives me a lot of confidence.
You know, something I think that you touched on that I actually wasn't expecting to talk about on this episode today is body positivity a lot. Because I think I wonder if there is room in the Orthodox world to talk about body positivity, because you know, oftentimes if I was to, I'm going to say this kind of liberally here, but to dress by the book, right? Or to dress by my community standard, living in an Orthodox community, right? And I dressed head to toe in black modest clothing that covered up my ankles and wrists, and really the only skin that you could see is on my face, and that's not including what's covered by the beard, right? Is body positivity something that is talked about on a regular basis, and how does that tie into clothing? And being able to show, you know, like I guess that relationship between your body and the clothing that you wear, and as you pointed out, the makeup that you put on. So I think that that's actually really interesting, to kind of you know, uncover a bit, even the amount of hair that you show or lack thereof. So very
Yeah.
interesting.
Naturally, my first instinct is I'm like, you know, this is so important for women. Like, I guess it depends on the household, but it's not just women who have like fears and misconceptions about like body image. Like, you know, really in the last like year of the Rose Grows, I've been doing a lot more workshops where teen leadership workshops where men and women are sharing things out loud. And body image is one of those things that men and women have a lot of the same struggles and questions, but there's A, not really a space for us to bring up those things. And B, you know, there's all this like ego and fear of like what I'll look like or what I'll sound like if I voice those things.
Mm-hmm. Well said. I do want to take a quick right turn from the conversation a little bit here, and just I picture the comment section saying this. So I have to also point this out. There
Yeah.
are also Black Jews. Okay.
Oh yeah.
You know, the Ethiopian like cousins of our line here. Like we like Rayna and I, we are definitely like from European background. We definitely look white, right? But there are also black Jews, and I just wanted to give a shout out to some of them that do exist. This is a more Ethiopian dressed background here, and I think it's absolutely beautiful the way that they dress and their definition of modesty. You also see figures like Nissim Black who come out there, black Jewish rapper. His music's great, by the way, and he's right now blowing up the Jewish world and the music scene. It's awesome, but I think it's very real. I think a black voice in the Jewish world is very real, and I can already just picture the comment section saying, "Oh, that you're all just white European colonizers," and it's like, well, first of all, you're just an anti-Semite using Zionism to mask how you feel, and second of all, black Jews exist too, and so we do plan on this podcast to bring on black Jews to represent their voices as well.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because again, like, Jews are people. We come in different heights. We come in different sizes. We come in different, skin tones with intermarriage. Like, also you have, all kinds of like very interesting like family lines and history lines. And you also have people who, for them, I think it's also important, like when I said them, I mean like the people who are going to be commenting like white colonizers, da 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 da. Jewish people have faced discrimination for over 3,000 years. We've been kicked out of countries. We've been treated as second-class citizens. If you have a passport that says Israel on it today, there's over 30 countries who won't let you like enter. Like, when they voted like on whether or not like Israel could exist, like there were a lot of countries who said no. So it's important to know that, the Holocaust is like the largest genocide in recent history. So that's why we talk about it a lot. But as you go around the world and you learn not just how diverse like the Jewish people are, but how diverse our history is, in terms of, we're always going to have issues. There's always going to be people who are going to want to dimmer or shimmer. But as Jews, it is our responsibility to stand together, to shout louder and shine brighter. And in most recent time, I think in the last 10 years of my professional career, I truly believe the only reason people now are talking about anti-Semitism at all is because when Kanye West made his comments, it forced people outside of the Jewish community to take a stand. It forced businesses outside of the Jewish community to make a statement. And I echo that for anyone who's listening to this podcast. If you want people to care about what you care about or your cause, you have to educate people outside of the community if you want them to stand up for you and be a voice for you when you need it. Because again, in my experience, people only start giving a shit about anti-Semitism when people who aren't Jewish start talking about it. With what I do professionally, diversity and inclusion, which really no one cared about until COVID, right? Black Lives Matter, Asians were being discriminated against. Jewish people have been left out. Before Kanye, we were left out of a lot of those panels. We weren't being brought into companies to address, issues like some of these other minorities do. So how we end the podcast is how I want to start. What does a Jew look like? We're a minority and we look different.
Well said.
And until the rest of society can understand and accept that we are a minority and that we have a history and we're not going anywhere, especially now that we have a home and our ancestral homeland. Drake is Jewish, but I think he was singing about the Jews when he said, started at the bottom, now we're here. Yes, there are people in the world who hate us. Yes, there are people in the world who want to judge us. But you know what? For every one anti-Semite, there's about 20 other people in the world who will love you and respect you and want to learn from you. And not just because you're Jewish, because you're a good person.
Well said, Rayna. And I want to end it on that strong note right there. I want to thank you so much for being on Bad Jew. For those who are listening, how can they reach out to you?
What you gonna do when they come for you, Bad Jew, Bad Jew? I've been singing that the last week, Chaz. Thank you so much for hosting me on this podcast.
Until we get the rights, the current theme song will stay, but until we get the rights for Bad Cops, we can then make that the theme song for this podcast. Yeah.
Excellent. So for those who want to know more, you can find me on all social media platforms at The Rose Grows. You can visit my website, therosegrows.com. There you can learn about all my adventures, from hanging out with Holocaust survivors, going on a speaker tour, and dropping my new book, The Girl Who Wore Two Different Shoes, which will be available this fall. Chaz, thank you so much for having me. And for all you guys listening out there, just want to remind you, be the light.
Shalom.